Empire Star by Samuel Delany was originally published in 1966 as an ace double with Tree Lord of Emmeton. However, it was intended by Delany to be published and hoped by Delany to be published with his other work in 1966, Babel 17, which actually won the Nebula Award. And I totally agree with Delany about those two being published together. When I read Empire Star, that is how I read it. Vintage Books actually published it in the way that Delany intended it in the early 2000s, and that was the copy that I got to read. Now, of course, I've already read and reviewed Babel 17 on this channel. I loved it so much, I actually went out and bought the very expensive Easton Press copy. I will put that review up above, although I just spoiled it for you because I told you I loved it. But the reason why I think Delany was correct in that these two should be read together is I feel like Babel 17 is Delany at his most accessible and best, in my personal opinion. However, Empire Star is Delany at his most Delany. Empire Star is a coming-of-age story where you follow the journey of Comet Joe, a newly minted 18-year-old who has come across a crash landing where he finds a dying person, and Jewel, which is a crystallized life form that has a message that must be delivered to the Empire Star, which is a black hole. And it's like a outpost by a black hole or black hole. I honestly cannot figure out which of the two it is, and I don't quite remember, and it wasn't really clear to me. You can correct me in the comments, I'm perfectly fine with that. Jewel has a message and it needs to be delivered to the Empire Star, and you know, as a crystallized rock life form, it can't exactly make that trip by itself. It enlists Comet Joe's help in order to make the journey to deliver the very important message. What is the very important message that must be delivered to Empire Star? You don't know. It doesn't know. And you find out along the journey. So the reason why I say that Samuel R. Delany is the most Samuel R. Delany in this book is because he is a writer of speculative fiction. He writes about ideas, philosophy, psychology, sexuality, which, you know, all of those themes are also present in his other works. But one of his biggest criticisms I see from other individuals that read Delany is that he has a tendency to get in his own way. And this book to me was a prime example of that. It was just simple and yet complex, and it was really, really hard for me to get into the story at all or enjoy it. I wasn't swept away in the story. It was just like, why is this happening? Why is he doing this? The way Delany tells the story, the coming of age story, is through the notion of becoming a more complex being as you age and get older. So the concept of being simplex, not necessarily meaning stupid, but like your grasp of the world as you are young is very small. So it is not that you're stupid, you're just ignorant. You don't have a wider view of the world. You learn how to do fine motor functions. You go from like recognizing colors and basic numbers to, as you get older, some of us being able to do calculus. That is the analogy that Delany makes in order to show the growth of Comet Joe as he goes from this simple viewpoint of the world and this very small view of the stars in the galaxy into a more complex or multiplex view as he ages and as he travels. And he gives it this finite structure of simplex, complex, and multiplex in order to help, I guess, the reader understand that story, to latch on to a concrete structure, to tell this very nuanced story of how you grow as a person and how your mind expands as a person, and how sometimes when you are at that stage of life when you've led a long and varied life, how it's hard to sometimes relate to individuals that are still at that very simple, simplex, rigid worldview, and how that can cause conflict. Which I do give Delany credit for doing that in a very interesting and masterful way in the story with some of the interactions that Comet Joe has throughout the story. Comet Joe along the way also encounters the Lil, which are an enslaved race of aliens, and they are the builders of this world, where not only do they build basic things like houses and structures and roads, but they also build the infrastructure, not just in, you know, the lights and the power and the waterways and systems, but also like the financial systems, the governmental system. They are the builders of this world, and they are enslaved in order to create these things. And those that own the Lil are inflicted with the sadness of Lil. So of course, being an enslaved person, or an enslaved alien in this case, is a horrible thing. It is absolutely atrocious. Editing Bob here, I believe Samuel R. Delany was trying to make a comment or a criticism of how slavery was justified for a unnecessarily long time in America, about it being a necessary evil, and making a statement through the punishment of being an owner of the Lil with the inflicted sadness that there can be no joy in the subjugation of others, and how there is only sorrow when other beings are being exploited. And again, I have a lot of respect for the points that Delany was trying to make in this book, and I have a lot of respect overall for the book. That doesn't mean the reading experience was enjoyable, and not necessarily because he's a bad writer, because I'm able to understand these concepts, these complicated concepts that he's trying to make in this very short and what would otherwise be considered just a coming-of-age jaunt in space. But because necessarily the structure wasn't good enough to make that experience enjoyable. And I mean, considering the topics we're discussing, does that need to be enjoyable? That's another argument you can make, but I'm not captivated by the work. My frontal lobe is developed enough to understand the concepts he's trying to get, and also the allegory and the analogy and all of the underlying messaging he's doing in his story, which is why I have a lot of respect for the book. The overall story feels a lot like a hot mess, and/or I need to be an adolescent to enjoy, because I can ignore all the subtext and just get the "there's a dude in space" thing, or I otherwise, or I need to be on drugs. Honestly, I felt a lot of the time I should, if I was high the way that, 1960s LSD trips are described, this probably would be great. I'm not implying that he was doing those things. I'm just saying that, like, I was like, and I'll make the point later on, but this is where I feel like Delany's writing with speculative fiction falls a little short, and how the Delany is too Delany. Not having any of your own agency, of course, comes with great sadness, great sorrow, and this sorrow is shared by the person that owns them. So the more Lil that you own, the more that this feeling of sadness is compounded, and the greater that it affects you. But this is how life happens in this world, and so there are individuals that take on the sadness of the Lil in order to move society forward. It's a very interesting way to discuss the concept of slavery, and it is definitely very important to the book. So just so you're aware that is a part of the book. Like I mentioned, I did not enjoy the reading experience. It took me a lot longer to read than I expected, because the novel it's a novella. It's very short. It's only 100 pages. It doesn't follow a linear path. It does continue to skip around from perspectives and also in the story, especially the further along you go. I did not enjoy reading it. I did not at all. It was like I gave it 2 out of 5 stars, whereas I gave Babel 17, like if I could give it 4.75, I would have, because I really enjoyed the book. Shortly after I finished reading Empire Star, I listened to Neil deGrasse Tyson talk on a podcast about quantum entanglement and wormholes, about how wormholes, it is thought that wormholes now might be the structures holding the universe together. Like, and once you get more towards the end of the book, I felt like if only Delany had done a little bit more, went a little bit more into the hard science of the underlying discussion with the Empire Star. I've enjoyed quantum theory and learning more about quantum theory since I was in middle school, when I originally read, surprisingly, a fantasy book called Her Majesty's Wizard. In it, there is a discussion about Schrodinger's cat. In that book, I will eventually review that book on here because, you know, it is tattooed on me. I feel like I should put it on this channel. But I couldn't, as a 12-year-old, when I first read that book, I had no concept of what Schrodinger's cat was, and it intrigued me enough to where I eventually found John Grubbin, who is a British hard science writer, specifically in quantum theory, and he wrote a really great book about Schrodinger's cat, and I read that when I was 14, and it definitely helped me understand quantum theory. It's a pretty well done book for someone, you know, who at 14 had no concept of that level of science. So I enjoyed it. If you would like to read any of John Grubbin's books about quantum theory, they are very accessible in my personal opinion. But I felt like Samuel R. Delany in this book is so close to getting to that hard sci-fi that if he added more of that into his book and less of the speculative stuff, I probably would have enjoyed the reading experiences more, because it would have made it more interesting to me, more than the social and societal commentary that he was making in the book. But that's, again, a me thing. It is supposed to be a coming-of-age story. It is supposed to be an adventure, a young man's adventure through space and becoming an adult. So I believe if, you know, a younger reader reads this, they'd probably find more enjoyment in it. But yeah, that is Empire Star. If you're wondering why in this entire video you didn't actually see me physically show you the book, it's because I already sold it. I sold it and whatnot, but hopefully you have enjoyed the artwork that I have found to display. But thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next video. Until then, bye!